It's 20 to 4, Jazz Radio 94.1 FM. My guest in the studio, Louie Shelton, who's one of the great guitarists. He's worked with so many musicians over the years, people like Ella Fitzgerald, the Carpenters, Michael Jackson, Boz Scaggs, Seals and Crofts, and many great musicians. And Louie, a great story of when you went to school. You had a special guest when you were 12 that you quote as being your inspiration in getting started in the music business. Tell us about that.
There was a group called the Browns, Jim Ed and Maxine Brown, who had a lot of hit records themselves later on. They were doing the Louisiana Hayride in Shreveport, Louisiana, and they met Elvis there. He was also doing that show. He had just released his first singles, That's All Right Mama, Blue Moon, a couple of those. And they invited him for some reason to come to our little Pine Bluff Junior High School and do a concert. So it was just Elvis, his guitar player Scotty Moore, and his bass player Bill Black. And of course we had never seen any kind of energy like that coming off a stage before. And he was doing exactly what he did later on the Ed Sullivan Show and all the other things. It's just that it was made a very good first impression on all of us. And being friends of mine, I got to hang out, with him and have dinner and all that sort of stuff. And he was just a really fun, regular guy. And for the next few years, I was able to hang out with him whenever he'd come to Little Rock and play the bigger venues, and continued to be just this nice guy that just loved playing the guitar and singing backstage and being friendly with everyone.
Now, you got to work as a session musician and guitarist for so many great musicians, people like Ella Fitzgerald. How was it working with someone like Ella Fitzgerald?
That was great. A lot of session musicians describe the kind of work we were doing as 95% boring and 5% panic. But with her, it was that nice thing of we're getting to play some of the nice jazz tunes with great chord changes that we had played, in the clubs for so many years. And it was like a breath of fresh air, being able to actually, well, first of all, being in the presence of a legend like that for me was quite an experience anyway. So it was a great time for me.
And you also played for the Jackson 5 and Michael Jackson as well. That must have been a wonderful experience.
It was, it was unknown at the time because we were the first, we made the first records and no one had even heard of them before. So we were in there cutting these tracks that we didn't know if anything would ever, come of it or not. But as it turned out, it was really, some of the classic songs. I Want You Back, I'll Be There, ABC, all of those classics. We cut right there in the studio with them.
And you played the guitar on most of those tracks.
Yes, that's right.
And you also played with people like the Carpenters as well.
Yeah, well, the Carpenters... they were friends of a friend of mine, Joe Osborne, who was the original bass player for Ricky Nelson. He also played bass on all of the Simon Garfunkel hits like Bridge Over Troubled Water. All their hits Joe played on. Well, they were friends of Joe's, and we actually went around and cut demos with them in his garage studio before they had their record deal. So after they got signed to A&M Records, me and Joe got to play on their records.
And then you got into producing with working with Seals and Crofts and playing guitar on their CDs and also producing some of those albums.
We had quite a run. I think we did something like 10 albums over the next several years, probably 12 years or something like that. And we got lucky with a song called Summer Breeze that kind of was a hit for them. And we had Diamond Girl, a song called Get Closer, We May Never Pass This Way Again. We had quite a string of hit singles with them. Now, both of those guys were very good jazz musicians. As a matter of fact, Crofts used to play sax on the group, in the group. Well, they both used to play in the Champs, which had that instrumental hit, Tequila. And Seals played sax at that time. But he could sound just like John Coltrane. He's one of the best sax players I've ever worked with.
Just going back to the early days, you played the guitar for the Monkees, and of course they'd be appearing on stage or on TV, appearing to play the guitar, but it was actually you playing the guitar.
Yeah, they probably weren't quite up to playing on their records at that time, especially coming up with what the producers needed for hit kind of, licks and all that sort of stuff. And I had worked with their producers before, and they called me to come in and create those guitar parts for them.
Well, after all that, and also being involved in movie music and all sorts of musicians that you've worked for, what brought you to Australia?
All you have to do is look out the window here, and you can kind of answers that for you. We were at a point in Los Angeles where L.A. had kind of outgrown us a little bit as far as just a bit too many people. And we had school-age children, and we just thought we'd like to give them something nicer to grow up in. And I was working with a friend from Sydney, kept raving about how beautiful Australia was. And we said, okay, well, we'll go check it out. So we came down and spent 5 weeks in Sydney on Manly Beach. And I said, yeah, I could probably get used to this. We really loved it. We planned on coming down for 5 years. And that first time we actually stayed 12 years. And then we went back to Nashville for 10 because a lot of our family, we needed to, different reasons, just be around our family more. And then there came a point where our kids grew up and said, no, we want to raise our kids in Australia. So they moved back and we followed them. So here we are.
And are you still planning to do any touring or even session work for any musicians overseas or here?
Yeah, as a matter of fact, I just reconnected with my friends David Page and the guys from Toto and spent some time with them. I just got back from America. I spent a month over there. They would like to do a project that includes myself, David Page, possibly Nathan East, the bass player from Foreplay. He's playing with Toto a bit now, and Simon Phillips playing drums with him. We're thinking about doing something because Steve Lukather, the original Toto guitar player, is working solo now. So we plan on doing some recording and maybe doing some touring with that band. But I also would like to do some tours myself. I'm getting a lot of interest from Europe and also Japan to go there as a guitar player and feature some of the work I've done on these hit records. They've never seen me play before.
You're also promoting young talent as well. How does that work?
Well, it actually, that's just a matter of finding talent that has potential and going in with them into the studio and trying to bring them up to scratch to where we could get some interest from record companies. That's been something I've done for quite a few years now. Find talent, that's undiscovered talent, present it to record companies and get them signed to a record deal, and usually, hopefully produce it myself.
And Louie, some of the other people you've worked with over the years include Boz Scaggs. You did the solo on one of his big hits, I think it was Lowdown, wasn't it?
Yeah, I actually have an instrumental version of on my new CD of that one, the Souvenir album. I have an instrumental version of that one. That was really a fun project. The band on that basically was what later became Toto. David Page, who also co-wrote Lowdown, and he's made some pretty good bucks on that. Of course, he wrote Georgie Porgy, Africa, and all the other hits for a lot of the other hits for Toto. So he's got a good $500,000 coming in every year just as writers' royalties. That doesn't hurt. David was the keyboard player, Jeff Piccaro on drums, and David Hungate on bass, and myself on guitar. And that was a really nice project to do because unlike a lot of the sessions we did, Boz was there singing the vocal for us. So we were like a band, and a lot of that stuff was just first takes or just, all went down at one time. There wasn't overdubs or any of that kind of stuff. It was very organic in that way.
Yeah, and you also got to work with John Lennon. Now, what was he like to work with?
So I was invited to play on one of his sessions that Phil Spector was producing. We went down, and quite a few of, it was L.A. group of musicians that were playing on this particular record. It was one of John's early solo records, and I don't know the name of the album or anything. It was myself and Dr. John, who was on keyboards. Jim Horn led the horn section. Hal Blaine was on drums, and a lot of the old studio guys. And it was quite an interesting night because Phil Spector had a way of spicing things up. You know, he was crazy in those days as well. But John was really nice. I got to meet him at the beginning of the session when he was very sober, but the big bottle of vodka by his chair kind of changed things by the end of the night. He was still nice, but he was sort of laid out on the couch out in the hallway.
Been a great pleasure talking to you, and must get you to come in again one day and talk about your music, and we'll play some more of your tracks. In fact, I think it sounds like from some of your new CDs that you're turning a little bit towards a jazz.
Well, I'm actually doing both. I'm doing the live album is more of traditional jazz, and the other is a bit more, I guess, contemporary kind of jazz, smooth jazz, as we call it.
We certainly do. Well, Louie, thanks very much, and we'll talk to you again soon. It's 2 to 4. We've got news, sport, and weather coming up at the top of the hour.